Hello, welcome to the next section, manipulating the DOM. In this section, we'll be first modifying the document using the interface provided by the Document Object Model, DOM. Then we'll be creating elements and text on a page, moving or deleting elements. Finally, we'll be transforming a document by adding, removing or modifying attributes and properties. Now we move on to the first video of this section, manipulating attributes and properties. In this video, we're going to manipulate non-class attributes, data attributes, and DOM element attributes. Throughout the 4 sections of this course, we've been using the .addClass method and .removeClass method to demonstrate how we can change the appearance of elements on a page. Add these to the .toggleClass method, which alternates between adding and removing class names, and we have an efficient and robust way of handling classes. We may need to access or change several other attributes or properties from time to time. For manipulating attributes such as ID, rel, and href, jQuery provides the .attr and remove.attr methods. These methods make the changing an attribute simple matter. In addition, jQuery lets us modify more than one attribute at a time, similar to the way we worked with multiple CSS properties using the .css method. Let's start with some sample HTML. First, we'll create our index file, and here we add this code for sample HTML. Now we can iterate through each of these links inside class equals chapter and apply attributes to them one by one. If we need to set a single attribute value for all of the links, we can do so with a single line of code within our $handler. For this, we create our first JavaScript file, 5.0. And here, add this code. The .attr method can accept a pair of parameters, the first specifying the attribute name and the second being its new value. More typically, though, we supply an object of key-value pairs, as we have in listing 5.0. We'll modify multiple attributes at once. For this, we create another JavaScript file named 5.1 and add this code. The straightforward technique for passing .attr as simple object is sufficient when we want the attribute or attributes to have the same value for each matched element. Often, though, the attributes we add or change must have different values each time. One common example is that for any given document, each ID value must be unique if we want our JavaScript code to behave predictably. To set a unique ID value for each link, we can harness another feature of jQuery, such as .css and .each, value callbacks. A value callback is simply a function that is supplied instead of the value for an argument. This function is then invoked once per element in the matched set. Whenever data is returned from the function, it's used as the new value for the attribute. For example, we'll generate a different ID value for each element. So we'll create another JavaScript file, 5.2.js, and add this code block. Each time our value callback is fired, it's passed an integer indicating the iteration count. We're using it here to give the first link an ID value of wikilink-0, and the second wikilink-1, and so on. We're using the title attribute to invite people to learn more about the linked term in Wikipedia. In the HTML tags we've used so far, all of the links point to Wikipedia. However, to account for other types of links, we should make the selector expression a little more specific. For this, we create another JavaScript file and add this chunk of code. Here, this href is added. To complete our tour of the .attr method, we'll now enhance the title attribute of these links to be more specific about the link destination. Once again, a value callback is the right tool for the job. So we create a JavaScript file and add the code. This time we've taken advantage of the context of value callbacks. Just as with event handlers, the keyword this points to is the DOM element we're manipulating each time the callback is invoked. Here we're wrapping the element in a jQuery object, so that we can use the text method to retrieve the textual content of the link. This makes each link title different from the rest. So let's check the result. Before we proceed to check, we'll add a reference in our index file, and then run the index.html file. Here we've provided external links. HTML5 data attributes allow us to attach arbitrary data values to page elements. Our jQuery code can then use these values, as well as modify them. The reason for using data attributes is so that we can separate DOM attributes that control how they're displayed and how they behave, from data that are specific to our application. You'll use the data jQuery method to read data values and to change data values. Let's add some new functionality that allows the user to mark a paragraph as read by clicking on it. We'll also need a checkbox that hides paragraphs that have been marked as read. We'll use data attributes to help us remember which paragraphs have been marked as read. For this, we create another JavaScript file, 5.5, and add the code. Let's add a reference to this file in our index.html file and refresh the page. As you can see, the click event handler changes the visual appearance of paragraphs when they're clicked on. But the handler does something else too. It toggles the read data for the element. This lets us tie application-specific data to the element in a way that doesn't interfere with other HTML attributes that we might set. The change handler for the hide read paragraphs checkbox looks for paragraphs that have this data. The filter, I, P call, will only return paragraphs that have a read data attribute with a value of true. We're now able to filter elements based on specific application data. Here's what the page looks like with the red paragraphs hidden. As mentioned previously, there is a subtle distinction between HTML attributes and DOM properties. Attributes are the values given in quotation marks in the HTML source for the page, while properties are the values as accessed by JavaScript. We can observe attributes and properties easily in a developer tool like Chrome. The Chrome Developer Tool's Elements Inspector shows us that the highlighted P element has an attribute called the class with the value square. In the right panel, we can see that this element has a corresponding property called className with the value square. This illustrates one of the rare situations in which an attribute and its equivalent property have different names. In most cases, attributes and properties are functionally interchangeable, and jQuery takes care of the naming inconsistencies for us. However, at times we do need to be mindful of the differences between the two. Some DOM properties, such as node name, node type, selected index, and child nodes, have no equivalent attribute, and therefore are not accessible via the attr function. Moreover, data types may differ. The checked attribute, for example, has a string value, while the checked property has a Boolean value. For these Boolean attributes, it's best to test and set the property rather than the attribute to ensure consistent cross-browser behavior. We can get and set properties from jQuery using the .prop method. This line is used to get the current value of the checked property, while this sets a new value for the checked property. The .prop method has all the same features as .attr, such as accepting an object of multiple values to set at the same time and taking value callback functions. We'll now learn about the value of form controls. Perhaps the most troublesome difference between attributes and properties arises when trying to get or set the value of a form control. For text inputs, the value attribute is equivalent to the default value property, not the value property. For select elements, the value is usually obtained via the element's selected index property, or the selected property of its option elements. Because of these discrepancies, we should avoid using .attr, and in the case of select elements, even .prop, to get or set form elements values. Instead, we can use the .val method, which jQuery provides for these occasions. So we'll look at an example now. This line is used to get the current value of a text input. Well, this helps us to get the current value of a select list. This line sets the value of a single select list. And this sets the value of multiple select lists. As with .attr and .prop, .val can take a function for its setter argument. With its multipurpose .val method, jQuery yet again makes developing for the web much easier. With that, we conclude this video.